Before becoming the symbol that dominates the New York skyline today, there was a time when that stretch of Fifth Avenue was just another elegant block on the verge of disappearing. Few people know this, but before the Empire State Building existed, the legendary Waldorf Astoria Hotel stood there, the setting for luxurious balls, high society dinners, and gatherings that shaped the city's direction. Imagine the carriages arriving under the light of lanterns, men in tailcoats, women in long dresses crossing the chandelier-lit lobby. It was a prestigious address, a symbol of a refined, almost aristocratic New York. And then, it all came crashing down. At the end of 1929, while the financial market collapsed and insecurity spread through the streets, the walls of that hotel began to be demolished. The sound of sledgehammers echoed between the neighboring buildings. Dust rose into the air. Many wondered, who would dare to build something gigantic just when the whole country seemed to be shrinking? Now close your eyes for a moment. We are at the corner of 34th Street and 5th Avenue. It's the early 1930s. The wind carries the smell of burning coal. Cars honk insistently. Vendors shout offers from the sidewalks. The city remains alive, even amidst the uncertainty. Where there was once luxury and festivities, we see a vast emptiness surrounded by construction barriers. Workers walk with firm steps. Trucks are carrying steel beams. There's a curious feeling in the air, a mixture of fear and hope. New York was already an ambitious city. Skyscrapers were beginning to compete for height. The Chrysler Building had just impressed the world, but what was about to be built there promised to surpass all expectations. And here arises a question that almost no one asked aloud. Would it be madness to erect the tallest building in the world in the midst of an economic crisis? Or was that exactly what the city needed? While many Americans faced unemployment and hardship, hundreds of workers found a rare opportunity on that construction site. Simple men, many of them immigrants, climbed daily the metal structures that grew at an almost unbelievable speed. Day after day, floor after floor, the steel skeleton rose against the Manhattan sky. But before that tower touched the clouds, New York was still a different city. A city where the horizon had more visible sky, where the very idea of reaching such a height seemed too daunting. We are about to walk through this city that existed seconds before its transformation, and understand why that empty lot held much more than concrete and steel. It carried a promise. The year is 1930. The sharp silhouette of the Empire State Building cutting through the sky does not yet exist. In its place, we see cranes, scaffolding, and an impressive choreography of men working dozens of meters above the ground. The streets are crowded. Noisy buses compete for space with gleaming cars and yellow taxis that are beginning to become part of the city's identity. Traffic is already heavy. Traffic police are gesturing wildly in the middle of intersections, whistles echoing between buildings. New York is pulsating. The shop windows on Fifth Avenue remain elegant. Even in difficult times, businesses try to maintain their shine. Stores display well-tailored suits, impeccable hats, and refined dresses. It's true that there's less extravagance than in previous years, but there's a silent resistance, a determination not to let the crisis extinguish the city's pride. And there, amidst this backdrop, construction is progressing at an almost unbelievable pace. Imagine looking up and realizing that in just a few weeks, that steel skeleton has already surpassed neighboring buildings, which took years to complete. Workers walk on narrow beams with impressive ease. Some even have lunch sitting high up, chatting as if they were on a park bench. There wasn't the same security apparatus we know today. It was courage, balance, and necessity. Many of those men supported entire families. Each screw tightened represented more than urban progress. It represented dignity. Meanwhile, newspapers reported on the race to the skies. New York was experiencing a silent competition between skyscrapers. Height was synonymous with power, but it was also a symbol of foresight. The curious thing is that at street level, life went on almost normally. Bakeries opened early. Cafes were packed in the early morning. Office workers crossed the avenues with leather briefcases in their hands. Children ran on the sidewalks. The sound of hammers striking steel was already part of the soundscape, and the higher the structure rose, the more the city began to change without realizing it. The shadows cast at the end of the afternoon became different. The wind encountered new obstacles. The skyline, once relatively uniform, was beginning to take on a dominant presence. New York had always been ambitious, but at that particular moment, there was something almost defiant in the air. It's as if the city is saying to the world, we're still standing. And perhaps that's the most fascinating part of this story. Because the Empire State Building didn't start out as a tourist attraction. It began as a bold gesture amidst uncertainty. And we're still only at the beginning of this transformation. Now imagine waking up in Manhattan in 1930. The sun has barely begun to touch the rooftops, and the city is already bustling. The smell of fresh coffee wafts from the half-open doors of the cafes. Newspapers are handed out on street corners, headlines talking about the crisis, about worrying figures, but also speaking of that building that's growing faster than any other in history. For many families, times were uncertain. Small business owners struggled to keep their doors open. Tailors, shoemakers, and grocery store owners watched the flow of customers decrease compared to previous years. Still, life had to go on. And there, in the heart of the city, the building offered something rare: work. More than 3,000 men passed through the construction site. European immigrants, American laborers, experienced workers, and doctors. For many of them, that project wasn't just grand. It was essential. It was the difference between supporting their family or facing even harder days. Look up with me. The beams are hoisted with almost choreographed precision. And once cooled, they glow like tiny stars before being secured. The metallic sound echoes between the buildings, mingling with the horns and constant murmur of the city. And while the building rises at an impressive rate, about 4 floors per week, something curious happens. People begin to stop on the sidewalks just to watch. There's a mixture of astonishment and pride in their eyes. Some question, who will occupy so many offices in times like these? Others simply admire the courage of the undertaking. The truth is that no one could ignore that growing presence. Inside the houses at night, people talked about it. By the soft light of a lamp, families discussed the building that promised to be the tallest in the world. It was a subject that sparked the imagination. Children tried to draw it. Adults tried to understand its scale. And consider the sensory experience of that time. Without helicopters flying overhead, without the constant noise of commercial airplanes, the dominant sound came from the city itself. Footsteps, engines, voices, and above all, the pace of construction. With each new floor completed, the Manhattan skyline changed. Not abruptly, but gradually. It was as if the city was taking a deep breath before something bigger. But there was also a curious silence behind it all. A question that hung in the air. When you're finally ready, what will happen? Will that colossus of steel and limestone represent prosperity? Or will it become a lonely monument in difficult times? The answer wasn't clear yet. But one thing was evident. New York was no longer the same, and the transformation was only beginning. Then, on May 1st, 1931, the lights came on. The Empire State Building was officially open. Imagine being there that morning. The crowd gathered, eyes raised in wonder. The feeling of having witnessed something that went beyond the simple construction of a building. It wasn't just the tallest in the world. It was a silent declaration of resistance. But the initial reality was more complex than many imagine. The offices didn't fill up immediately. The economic crisis was still weighing heavily. For a time, many floors remained empty. Some New Yorkers even jokingly called it the empty state building. And yet, it remained imposing. At night, its lights stood out against the dark horizon. It became a landmark. People would arrange meetings by saying, "See you near the Empire State Building." He began to guide the city, physically and symbolically. As the years passed, something changed. The observatory at the top became an attraction. Visitors went up to see New York from an angle never before experienced. From up there, the city seemed organized, almost serene. Streets that seemed chaotic when viewed from the ground revealed a precise design. The building began to generate income not only from offices, but also from tourism. It became the setting for films, photographs, and cherished memories. It's become a postcard image. And if we return to that corner of 34th Street and 5th Avenue, we'll realize how much has changed. Where once there was an elegant hotel, then an empty space surrounded by construction barriers, today stands a presence that has shaped the very concept of the urban skyline. The wind blows differently. The shadows are cast longer. The flow of visitors is constant. But perhaps the most impressive thing is realizing that that bold gesture, begun amidst uncertainty, ended up defining the city's identity for generations. New York continued to grow. Other buildings emerged. The world has changed countless times, yet the Empire State Building has remained a landmark of architectural courage. When we look at it today, we see more than just steel and stone. We see the memory of a time when, even in the face of adversity, someone decided to build upwards. And perhaps that is the true legacy of that $41 million project, proving that cities, like people, can find strength precisely in the most challenging moments. Now I ask you, if we could go back in time once more and observe another city seconds before its great transformation, which one would you choose to explore?